Hi everyone! So this video is going to be all of the frequently asked questions that you have submitted in topic 1 and 2 that I think take a little bit more than just typing a response to answer your question. So I'm really excited to go through these today. You all had quite a few really great questions. Okay, so the first question is, how many lesson objectives do you have to add to your lesson plan? This really is going to depend on what you're teaching, but you do need to have at least one. You should have an objective for your lesson, but you can have about two, but you probably don't want more than one or two because you have to assess each objective. So everything that you say that the students will be able to do in your lesson, you need to have on your exit ticket that shows you that they can do that. So if you have that they're going to be able to answer questions about characters, answer questions about setting, and answer questions about the problem and solution in a story, then you have to make sure that your exit ticket or your end of lesson assessment has all of those things. And if it doesn't, then you fall out of alignment because you've said that they're able to do all of these things. So what you really want to think about is what I am saying these objectives are really what they're doing in the lesson, or do I need them? For example, if you had something like the students will be able to explain the character, and then you have the students will be able to analyze the character's actions, you could probably get rid of the objective that has the explain the character, because as they are analyzing the character's actions, they're really explaining the character to you. So sometimes you have more objectives than you need, but they kind of encompass one another. So 1 to 2, but it really depends on your lesson and what you want them to be able to do. Okay, next question is a really great question about Common Core. So it's basically, why do some states not have Common Core? Why do some have it? And how does this affect how difficult it is if students move? So the state standards are just that, they're state standards, because while we have a federal Department of Education, education is actually run on the state level. So the California legislature and Department of Education decides what happens in California schools, and the Arizona legislature and Department of Education decides what happens in Arizona schools. So when you have that, that means that they kind of get to decide for themselves what they want to do. And what represents the community and what the community or the state feels is important. So an example of that is that in the state of Arizona, we have a standard that students need to learn how to write cursive, because whoever decided and made our standards and the legislature, they said this is important to Arizona, so this needs to happen in Arizona. If you head to Texas, they might not have that standard. That doesn't mean they're not teaching it, but they just might not have it as a standard. So it's really up to the state to decide what they have for their state schools. So does this make it harder when students move? Yes. So if you have a student who is living in California and they have a standard in, say they're in second grade, and a second grade standard is to multiply single digit numbers. And they've learned it. Their teacher taught them they can multiply single digit numbers. A problem that can happen is if now they're moving from California to Arizona, and what if that standard still exists, multiply single digit numbers, but the standard is actually a third grade standard. So what's going to happen is that student's going to get to third grade and they're going to be taught single digit multiplication, which they already know. So the teacher's really going to have to work on, well, they already know this. How am I going to use this time to enrich them? So it's definitely something that is difficult, but one of the things that's kind of a light in that situation is that a lot of states, even if they don't use the Common Core, they've used the Common Core as inspiration for their standards. So there's not really too much difference when you go from state to state. It could just be the order difference is there. Okay, next question. How many teachers teach their subjects and don't regularly practice alignment? Is that something that happens often? So yeah, it actually happens a lot, because as teachers, we write this really long lesson plan. And what happens with your lesson is that you start always with your objective, right? You've got your standard and your objective, and then you type in all of this information. What is your hook going to be? How are you going to teach it to them? How are they going to practice? And then at the very, very end, you create your exit ticket or your end of lesson assessment. And sometimes we're busy, right? Teachers have a lot of lessons to write. We get busy. And sometimes we don't take that time to now look back at our objective and say, okay, when I started this, I said that my objective was XYZ, but actually in my end of lesson assessment, I'm asking them to do ABC. So then you need to think, well, what do I really want them to be doing? Is it what the objective is? Or is it what my assessment is? And if it's what your assessment is, you need to revise that objective. And if what you really want them to be doing is what the objective says, then you need to revise your assessment based on that. So it's really easy to kind of forget this last step to look at everything together. So yeah, it does happen a lot. But a really interesting thing is that as you're teaching, if you have a lesson, you're out of alignment and you don't realize it until maybe you're looking at your exit ticket and you think, oh, I wanted the students to be able to count by 10. And really what I had them do in their end of lesson assessment was write out numbers by 5. Okay, well, now I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, I don't know if my students can count by 10. I know if they can count by 5, but that wasn't my objective. Then you have the opportunity then to go back and reteach it. Or starting your lesson the next day, you could say, yesterday we talked about counting by 10. Hey, let's all practice counting by 10. And then really fast, you have 3 minutes, write your numbers by 10. And so give that assessment again so you really truly know if they've met the objective or not. Okay, is there a separate list of standards for special needs students who fall behind their grade level? So no, there isn't. But the thing about standards and the way you can think about them for when you're thinking about your students with special needs is don't think of it as grade level. Think of it as progression of thought and depth of their knowledge. So if you have a student who is in 3rd grade, you know that they have the 3rd grade standards, but you also know that if they are special needs, they may not be at that level. So what you can pull up right here is a vertical articulation, and this is on every single Department of Ed website for standards. So if you're in another state, these exist for your state. You just might have to look for them. But what it is it shows you the progression of standards through grade level. So if I had a 3rd grade student and I knew that he was behind grade level, what I would want to do is take a look at the very first standard, so this kindergarten standard, and think, okay, can they do this? Have they met this standard? And if the answer is no, then you start right here. This is where you meet them where they are. So just because they're in 3rd grade doesn't mean that they are expected to always meet 3rd grade standards. You're going to have to bring it back a little bit to where they are. Now, if you look at the kinder standard and you say, oh yeah, they can do that, then move up to 1st grade. Can they do that? Yes, then you keep going and then you stop where they are and then you develop lessons for that student based on where they are. And this is not just for special needs students. If you have any students in your class who are struggling with what you're trying to teach them, that means there's a gap. They don't have some sort of background knowledge or the previous standards have not been mastered for them to do what you are asking them to do. So you can always take a look at it and think, okay, I want them to be able to do this, but what do I need to teach them first before they can do that? Okay, next question is a really great one and something that you need to keep in mind always, no matter how far you are in your program. And that is if every state has its own certification process. And yes, it does. What you need to be certified in Arizona is absolutely different than what you need to be certified in California. You will have to take a certification exam no matter what state you're in, but sometimes you need a little bit more than that. So in Arizona, you have to take a certification exam. That's pretty much it. But for the state of California, you need to take your certification exam and you have to present a portfolio. So you don't want to graduate from your program and then realize, oh, I was supposed to be making a portfolio this whole time. So you can head to this website and I'll put it in the link, but it will show you every single state and information about being a teacher in that state. It's actually really interesting. So I clicked on Arizona and it will pull up how much money you could make as a teacher in Arizona, which is very interesting. Now, these are averages. Some states and some districts will be lower, some will be higher. It just depends. But if you head on down here, then this will tell you what you need to be certified. So of course, you need your coursework. And then here are the required tests. So you can see you can take the NES or the AEPA. It is up to you. And then they have links to where you can find out more information about those tests. So definitely check out this website and look at your state. Okay, next question is, how can I make sure my learning objective is clear and measurable? So you need to think of your objectives very simply. It is the verb, the action the students need to take. Is it describe, analyze, create, evaluate, explain, and then the content. So what are they doing and in what context? So describe the characters in a story. Explain the causes of the Civil War. Simple as that, very simple formula. And you want to make sure that it's measurable, which means you can see that the students can do it. And it's not just like see with your eyes, but you can see on an assessment that they're able to do that skill. So one rule of thumb, do not ever, 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 ever use the word understand in an objective. This is not measurable. You can't tell if someone can understand. You know they understand something if they take an action to do something. So it's not saying I want you to understand the causes of the Civil War. I don't know if you understand it unless you do something else. How would you know if students understand the causes of the Civil War? Well, would they explain them? Then explain the causes of the Civil War is actually your objective. So one verb only makes it clear. Making sure it's something you can see them do is measurable. Okay, next question is, will the curriculum give specific lesson plan templates, or does it just give information that you then make lesson plans from? So curriculum and instruction are very different things. So a curriculum is what you need to teach. So a curriculum could be, okay, from August to September, you're teaching about animal habitats. And here are some books you can use to do that. Or here are some lessons you can use to do that. The instruction is all you as the teacher. It's how you teach it. And that's really up to your style. What's your teaching style? Or how do you feel like your students learn best? That's going to look different for every single teacher. So the curriculum will tell you what to teach. Your instruction is how you teach it, and that's what you put in the lesson plan, how you are teaching it. So no, a curriculum will not give you your lesson plan templates. If you do have a curriculum that does, then you do want to make sure that you're not just walking in with your coffee at the beginning of the day, pulling out the lesson plan that was given to you and then teaching it. You want to look at that and think, does this align with my philosophy of teaching? Do I think children learn best this way? Do my specific students I have right now learn this way? And how can I put my spin on it? Make it more engaging, make it more fun for my students. Okay. When lesson planning and figuring out what the students need to know by the end of the unit, if a few students do not understand the objectives by the end, do we move on still? Or do we continue to practice as we move on to the next unit? This will definitely depend. So if you teach a lesson, you give your end of lesson assessment, you want to look at that. You want to look at that exit ticket or the quiz or whatever it is and think, do they have it or do they not have it? And what I used to do is put the students in 3 piles. So it was like a small exit ticket. I would sort them this way. So the first pile would be, they've got it, they're ready to move on. The middle pile would be, they've got it, they might need a little bit more practice, but they're on the right track. And then my last pile would be, they're lost, they really need help, SOS, they need to have this lesson taught to them again. So when you look at your 3 piles, if 80% of your class is in the pile of they've got it, then you are ready to move on And then the students that are in the need more practice and have no idea what's going on, they need it again, then you're going to pull them in small groups, a lot like this teacher here, and teach them one-on-one or in the small group to catch them up with the rest of the class. So you don't want to keep the 80% of your students who've got it. You don't want to hold them back while you teach these other students again. Now, if it's the inverse and you have 2 students who have it and 80% of your class don't have it, don't move on. You need to teach this whole lesson again to the whole class because majority of your class didn't get it. They haven't met the lesson objective. And so they need it taught to them again. Now you might feel the pressure like, well, I have this lesson planned for tomorrow. We need to keep going. You're gonna waste your time if you keep going because what you wanted them to learn on this day, they didn't get. So the next time you teach it to them or when you build on it for the next lesson, they didn't have the foundation. They're not going to be successful there. So you just have to pause, push that lesson you had planned for the next day back and teach this lesson again because you're going to lose them and you don't want to move on without them. Okay, do all schools make you submit your lesson plans or addenda? It really just depends on the school or the district. So some schools might say, we want you to turn in 1 lesson plan a week so we can see where you're at. And maybe if we want to come and observe you and see how things are going in your class, we know a great time to come in. Some schools may say, well, you're a first-year teacher. I want to see everything. I want to know that you're planned and prepared. And then some schools might just say, you know what, as long as if you have a car accident and you're not coming in that day, if there's a lesson plan on your desk for a sub, we're good. It's really just going to depend on your school, but when you're hired, they will let you know what the expectation is. However, even if you don't have to submit your lesson plans, you should be writing them. The foundation of this class is you should never head into a class to teach students without a well thought out lesson plan. Okay, does putting too much information on a lesson plans exist? Yes, it does, but it really depends on your style. So, for example, you can see in the picture here that this teacher wrote out every single thing they were going to say in the lesson, word for word. So they probably had the paper next to them and they read from it. When I was first teaching, when I was going in for practicum and in my first year of teaching, I did just that. I wrote down every single thing I was going to say to the students and every question I was going to ask them. And I even thought through, like, if I ask them this question, if they say this, then I'll say this. And if they say this, then I'll say this. That worked for me. And then after my first year teaching, I never did that again because it was way too much time put into planning. But for my first year, it was like that security blanket for me. So I had that paper, printed out lesson plan with me as I sat in front of the kids and taught my lesson just in case I drew a blank and I didn't know where I was going, I would have it. As an experienced teacher, I didn't need that. I had taught my lessons, 7 years in a row, so I could teach this in my sleep. So it really just depends on your style and what you need to be successful. Okay, that is the end of our questions. Thank you so much for these questions. I cannot wait to do this again. You all had amazing questions, and I hope that it helped you really kind of get a better view of teaching and lesson planning. Have a great day.